The rain was relentless, soaking through my jacket as I stood frozen in the alley, staring at the text on my phone, "Meet me at 9. Don't tell Jamie." It was from Mr. Callahan, Jamie's dad, a man who'd always seemed more shadow than substance. My heart pounded. Why would he need me? A broke college kid. For anything, let alone something secret. I was Alex Harper, 22, a nobody from a nowhere town in upstate New York, scraping by on scholarships and late-night diner shifts. Jamie Callahan was my best friend, my roommate, my everything. I couldn't say. We'd met freshman year at NYU, bonded over cheap coffee and a shared love for old jazz records. He was all sharp edges and easy smiles, with eyes that could unravel you in seconds. I'd spent 3 years hiding how I felt, terrified of ruining the one good thing in my life. But that night, everything was about to change. I shoved my phone into my pocket and glanced at the time, 8:45 p.m. The alley behind our dorm was a maze of brick and graffiti, the kind of place where secrets festered. Mr. Callahan had been vague but insistent, his voice low and urgent when he'd called earlier. "It's about Jamie," he'd said. "I need your help. Just you." I should have said no. I should have told Jamie. But loyalty, or maybe something stupider, like love, made me agree. I trudged through the rain to the address he'd given, a rundown bar in Hell's Kitchen called the Rusty Anchor. The neon sign flickered, casting red light across the wet pavement. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the hum of low voices. Mr. Callahan sat in a corner booth, his broad shoulders hunched, his face half hidden by a baseball cap. He was in his late 40s, rugged, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that missed nothing. He'd always intimidated me, not because he was cruel, but because he was unreadable. "Alex," he said, voice gravelly, as I slid into the booth. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, my throat tight. "What's this about, Mr. Callahan?" He leaned forward, his hands clasped around a glass of whiskey. "Call me Tom. And it's about keeping Jamie safe." My stomach twisted. Jamie wasn't just my friend, was the guy who'd stayed up with me when my mom died, who'd laughed at my terrible cooking, who'd made me feel like I belonged somewhere. The idea of him in danger made my skin crawl. "Safe from what?" I asked. Tom's eyes darkened. "There's a guy, Ethan Merrow. He's bad news, runs a crew out of Brooklyn. Jamie got mixed up with him last summer. Thought it was just a fling. But Ethan doesn't let go easy. He's been sniffing around, asking questions. I need you to get Jamie out of the city tonight." I blinked, trying to process. Jamie had never mentioned an Ethan. He'd always been private about his dating life. But this felt like a bomb. "Why me? Why not you?" "Because Jamie trusts you," Tom said. "And because I'm being watched. If I make a move, Ethan will know. You're clean. You can slip under the radar." The bar's jukebox kicked on, some old Springsteen song about running. I felt like I was drowning. "What do I do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Tom slid a burner phone across the table. "Take this. There's a car waiting outside. Keys in the glove box. Get Jamie to a safe house upstate address is programmed in the phone. Don't stop for anyone. Don't call me unless it's an emergency." I stared at the phone, its weight heavier than it should have been. "And what about you?" "Don't worry about me," he said, his voice sharp. "Just keep my son safe." I left the bar with my heart in my throat. the burner phone burning a hole in my pocket. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the city felt alive, like it was watching me. I walked back to our dorm, my mind racing. Jamie was probably sprawled on our couch, sketching or listening to Miles Davis, oblivious to whatever mess his dad had just dragged me into. How was I supposed to tell him we had to run? How was I supposed to hide that I was terrified not just for him, but for what this night might cost us? When I opened the door, Jamie was exactly where I'd pictured him, his sketchpad balanced on his knees, a pencil tucked behind his ear. His dark hair fell into his eyes, and he looked up with that half smile that always made my chest ache. "You're soaked," he said, laughing. "What's with the face? You look like you saw a ghost." I forced a grin, but it felt wrong. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. "And you're not gonna like it." Jamie's smile faded as I sat across from him, the burner phone heavy in my pocket. The dorm room smelled of coffee and old books, a safe haven that felt fragile now. I took a breath, trying to find the words to explain without breaking everything. "Alex, what's going on?" Jamie asked, setting his sketchpad aside. His voice was steady, but his eyes searched mine, picking up on my fear. "Your dad called me," I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "He says you're in trouble. Some guy named Ethan Merrow. He wants me to get you out of the city. Tonight." Jamie's face went pale, his jaw tightening. "Ethan," he muttered, like the name was a curse. He stood, pacing the small room, his hands raking through his hair. "I thought that was over. I ended it months ago." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What was it?" "Jamie, you never told me about him." He stopped pacing, his back to me, staring at the wall where his sketches hung wild. Vibrant drawings of cityscapes and faces, including one of me he'd done last year. "It was stupid," he said finally. "Last summer, I was lost. Met Ethan at a club. He was charming, intense, said all the right things. But he's not what he seems. He's into some dark stuff dealing. Maybe worse. When I tried to walk away, he got possessive." The word hung in the air, sharp and ugly. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay. But the burner phone felt like a ticking bomb. "Your dad thinks Ethan's coming for you," I said. "We need to go? Now." Jamie turned, his eyes fierce. "I'm not running. Alex. I'm done letting him control me." I stood, grabbing his arm. "You're not running. You're surviving. Your dad gave me a car, an address. We'll figure it out together. Okay." He looked at my hand on his arm, then at me, something softening in his expression. "You're really doing this? For me?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight with everything I couldn't say. "Yeah, Jamie. For you." We packed light backpacks with clothes, phones, and whatever cash we had. The dorm felt like a memory already as we slipped out into the night. The car was an old black sedan parked a block away, keys in the glove box as promised. I slid into the driver's seat, Jamie beside me, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. As we pulled onto the West Side Highway, the city lights blurred past, a kaleidoscope of neon and glass. The burner phone sat in the center console, its screen dark but looming. Jamie was quiet, staring out the window, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. "You okay?" I asked, glancing at him. He didn't look at me. "I should have told you about Ethan." I just didn't want you to think less of me. My grip tightened on the wheel. I could never think less of you. He turned then, his eyes catching mine for a moment, raw and unguarded. You don't know how much that means, he said softly. The safe house was a cabin in the Catskills. A 3-hour drive that felt like forever. The highway gave way to winding roads, trees closing in like sentinels. Jamie fiddled with the radio, landing on a jazz station that filled the car with Coltrane's mournful saxophone. It was almost enough to make me forget why we were running. Almost. Around midnight, we stopped at a gas station, the kind with flickering fluorescents and a clerk who barely looked up. I filled the tank while Jamie grabbed snacks inside. As I watched him through the glass, laughing at something the clerk said, my chest ached with a mix of fear and something deeper. Something I'd buried for years. That's when I saw the headlights. A sleek black SUV pulled into the lot. Slow and deliberate, like a predator circling. My pulse spiked. I didn't know if it was Ethan or just paranoia, but every instinct screamed danger. I banged on the gas station door, waving Jamie out. We gotta go, I said, my voice low as he jogged over, confusion on his face. What's wrong? I nodded toward the SUV, its tinted windows unreadable. That's not a coincidence. Jamie's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. We jumped into the car, tires screeching as I pulled onto the road. The SUV followed, keeping its distance but never letting us out of sight. My hands shook on the wheel. The burner phones weighed a reminder of Tom's warning, don't stop for anyone. Alex, Jamie said, his voice tight. What if it's him? Then we don't stop, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Not until we're safe. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless. The SUV's headlights a constant in the rearview mirror. I didn't know what we were driving into, but I knew one thing. I'd do whatever it took to keep Jamie safe, even if it meant facing the most dangerous night of my life. The SUV's headlights burned into the rearview mirror, a relentless pair of eyes that refused to blink. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the Catskills winding road slick with rain that had started again. Soft but insistent. Jamie sat rigid beside me, his breath shallow, his hand gripping the door handle like it could anchor him. Alex, what do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loud might make the danger more real. Keep moving, I said, my eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. The burner phone in the console buzzed, making us both jump. I grabbed it, glancing at the screen, a text from an unknown number. Take the next left. Lose them in the woods. Is that my dad? Jamie asked, leaning over. I don't know, I admitted, my gut twisting. It could be Tom. It could be a trap. But the SUV was gaining, its engine a low growl behind us. I didn't have time to think. At the next fork, I yanked the wheel left, the sedan skidding onto a narrow dirt road that vanished into dense trees. The headlights dimmed behind us, the SUV struggling to follow on the uneven path. Branches scraped the car's sides, and the tires churned through mud. Jamie braced himself against the dashboard, his eyes wide. You sure about this? Nope, I said, forcing a grin to hide my panic. But we're not stopping now. The road or what passed for one twisted deeper into the forest, the trees swallowing the moonlight. For a moment, I thought we'd lost them. Then the headlights reappeared. Closer now, the SUV's driver undeterred. My heart hammered. Whoever was behind us wasn't just following, they were hunting. The burner phone buzzed again. Another text. Keep going. Half a mile. There's a clearing. Hide the car. I read it aloud. And Jamie shook his head. His voice sharp. That's not my dad. He'd call. Not text like that. I wanted to argue. To cling to the hope that Tom was guiding us. But Jamie was right. This felt wrong. Still, the clearing was our best shot. I pushed the gas harder. The sedan rattling as we hit ruts in the path. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a small open space surrounded by pines. I swerved off the road, parking behind a cluster of bushes, and killed the engine. We sat in silence, the only sound our ragged breathing and the distant hum of the SUV. Its headlights swept past, then stopped. Doors slammed. Voice slow. Male. Too muffled to make out carried through the night. Jamie grabbed my hand. His grip tight. His skin cold. Alex. He whispered. If this is Ethan, he's not here to talk. I squeezed his hand back, my mind racing for a plan. We stay quiet. We stay hidden. They'll move on. But they didn't. Footsteps crunched closer. Deliberate. Searching. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, grazing the bushes shielding us. I held my breath, my free hand hovering over the keys in the ignition. If they found us, we'd have to run, but to where? Jamie leaned closer, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't, I said fiercely. I'm here because I want to be. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just Ushi's fear. My resolve, the unspoken thing between us that had been growing for years. Then a twig snapped. Too close, and the moment shattered. Stay down, I hissed, pulling him lower in the seat. The flashlight beam swept over the car, missing us by inches. I could hear my pulse in my ears, loud as a drum. The voices were clearer now, 2 men. Maybe 3. One laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. They can't be far, one said. Check the woods. I glanced at Jamie, his face pale but set, like he was ready to fight. I shook my head slightly. Fighting wasn't an option, not yet. We needed to be smart. The burner phone buzzed again, and I silenced it, not daring to look. Whoever was texting, they knew too much. Minutes dragged like hours. The footsteps faded, the flashlight beams moving deeper into the woods. I waited, counting to 100 in my head, then started the car as quietly as I could. The engine purred, barely audible. I eased us back onto the path, praying the SUV's crew was too far to hear. We drove in silence, the clearing behind us, the road ahead uncertain. Jamie kept his hand in mine, and I didn't pull away. Where are we going? He asked finally. The safe house, I said, though I wasn't sure I trusted the address anymore. We'll figure out what's next when we get there. The forest thinned as we neared the Catskills' edge, the sky opening up to reveal a scattering of stars. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could outrun this. Maybe we could be okay. Then the burner phone rang, shrill and insistent, shattering the quiet. Jamie grabbed it before I could, his thumb hovering over the answer button. Don't, I said, but it was too late. He pressed it, holding the phone to his ear. Jamie, a voice said, smooth and cold. Not Tom's. You can't hide forever. Jamie's hand trembled as he held the burner phone, the voice on the other end dripping with menace. I grabbed it from him, ending the call before Ethan or whoever it was could say more. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engine and the patter of rain on the windshield. Was that him? I asked, my voice low, though I already knew the answer. Jamie nodded, his eyes distant, like he was reliving something he'd tried to bury. That was Ethan. He always sounded like that, calm, but like he could snap your neck without blinking. I tightened my grip on the wheel, the safe house address still programmed into the phone's GPS. It was our only lead. But after that call, it felt like a trap. We can't go there, I said. Not now. Then where? Jamie's voice cracked, frustration bleeding through. We can't just drive forever. Alex. I didn't have an answer. The road stretched ahead, a dark ribbon cutting through the Catskills, the SUV's absence more unsettling than its presence. Ethan knew we were out here. He'd found us somehow through the phone. Maybe. Or something worse. I glanced at the burner, tempted to smash it. But it was our only link to Tom. To answers. We find somewhere to lay low, I said finally. A motel. Somewhere off the grid. We'll figure out our next move. Jamie didn't argue, but his silence was heavy, like he was carrying the weight of his past mistakes. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that Ethan was the monster here, but words felt useless against the fear in his eyes. We drove for another hour, the GPS abandoned, until we found a faded sign for the Pineview Motel, a rundown place off a quiet highway. The neon vacancy sign flickered like a dying star. I parked in the shadows, away from the road, and we grabbed our bags, moving fast. The clerk, an older woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at us as she handed over a key for a room at the far end. The room smelled of stale smoke and damp carpet, but it was shelter. Jamie dropped his bag on the bed. His shoulders slumped. I should have stayed in the city, he said, his voice barely audible. Faced him myself. Don't, I said, stepping closer. You're not alone in this. Jamie, you never were. He looked at me, his eyes searching, like he was trying to believe it. Why are you doing this? Alex, you could have walked away. You should have. I swallowed hard, the truth clawing its way up. Because I care about you, I said, my voice raw. More than you know. The air between us shifted, charged with something unspoken. Jamie stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. And for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But then he pulled back. His expression shuddered. We should sleep, he said. Figure this out in the morning. I nodded, disappointment and relief warring in my chest. We took turns keeping watch, the burner phone silent but ominous on the nightstand. I sat by the window, the curtains cracked just enough to see the parking lot. Every passing car made my pulse spike, but the night stayed quiet. At dawn, Jamie took over, his sketch pad open in his lap. I watched him draw, his pencil moving with a kind of desperate focus, like he could sketch his way out of this mess. What are you drawing? I asked, needing to break the silence. You, he said simply, not looking up. Always you. My breath caught, but before I could respond, the burner phone buzzed again. A text this time, Pineview Motel. Room 12. You're not as clever as you think. My blood ran cold. They'd found us. Jamie, I said, my voice tight. We need to move. Now. He grabbed his bag, his face pale but resolute. We slipped out the back window, the morning air sharp against our skin. The sedan was still there, untouched. But as we reached it, a figure stepped from the shadows, a man in a dark coat, his face half lit by the motel's flickering sign. Ethan. He was taller than I'd imagined, lean but dangerous, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jamie, he said, his voice smooth as ice. You've been hard to find. Jamie froze, his hand on the car door. I stepped in front of him, my heart pounding. Stay away from him, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan laughed. A low, chilling sound. You must be Alex, the loyal friend. You have no idea what you're in, do you? He took a step closer, and I saw the glint of metal in his hand, a knife. Small but deadly. Jamie grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the car. Go, he whispered. Drive. I didn't hesitate. We dove into the sedan, the engine roaring to life as Ethan lunged forward. Tires screeched as we peeled out, his figure shrinking in the rearview mirror. But I knew he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The sedan tore down the highway, the Catskills blurring into a haze of green and gray. My hands shook on the wheel, Ethan's knife glinting in my mind like a warning. Jamie sat silent, his eyes fixed on the side mirror, as if expecting Ethan to appear any second. How did he find us? Jamie asked, his voice hollow. The phone. I glanced at the burner in the console, its screen dark but damning. Probably. We need to ditch it. I pulled over at a rest stop, the lot empty except for a lone trucker smoking by his rig. I grabbed the phone, smashed it against a rock, and tossed the pieces into a dumpster. It felt like cutting a lifeline, but it was our only shot at staying off Ethan's radar. Jamie watched, his expression unreadable. What now? He asked. We keep moving, I said, though I had no plan, no destination. We'll find somewhere safe. He nodded, but the weight of his fear was palpable. I wanted to reach for him, to promise everything would be okay. But the truth was, I didn't know. Ethan wasn't just a jilted ex, was a predator. And we were prey. We drove south, avoiding main roads, the sedan's gas gauge creeping toward empty. By noon, we reached a small town called Willow Creek, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. A diner with a faded sign caught my eye as kitchen. It looked safe, ordinary. We needed food, a moment to breathe. Inside, the diner was warm, smelling of coffee and bacon. We slid into a booth, the vinyl seats cracked but comfortable. Jamie ordered pancakes, his attempt at normalcy, but his hands trembled as he poured syrup. I watched him, my heart aching. He was trying so hard to hold it together. Talk to me, I said softly. What's going on in your head? He looked up, his eyes raw. I keep thinking about last summer. Ethan made me feel seen. But it was all a lie. He wanted control, not me. And now you're stuck in this because of my mess. I reached across the table, my hand covering his. I'm not stuck. I'm here because I choose to be. Because you're worth it. His breath hitched. And for a moment, I thought he might pull away. Instead, he turned his hand, lacing his fingers with mine. Alex, he said, his voice barely audible. I don't know what I'd do without you. The words hit me like a punch. All the years of unspoken feelings crashing to the surface. I wanted to tell him everything, how I'd loved him since that first night we stayed up talking. How his laugh was the best sound I knew. how I'd face 100 Ethans to keep him safe. But before I could, the diner's door jangled, and 2 men walked in. They weren't locals. Their leather jackets and sharp eyes screamed trouble. One scanned the room, his gaze lingering on us. My stomach dropped. "Jamie," I said under my breath. "We need to go?" He followed my gaze, his face paling. We left cash on the table and slipped out the back, the men's voices fading as we reached the sedan. I drove fast, taking random turns, praying we'd lose them. Jamie kept watch, his body tense. "They're not following," he said after a while, but his voice lacked conviction. We found another motel, this one even shabbier than the last, and paid in cash. The room was small, with 1 bed and a chair by the window. Jamie sat on the bed, his head in his hands. "This is never going to end, is it?" he said. I knelt in front of him, my hands on his knees. "It will. We'll find a way. I promise." He looked at me, his eyes glistening. "You can't promise that, Alex. You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me," I said. "Everything." And he did. Over the next hour, Jamie spilled it all, how Ethan had pulled him into a world of late-night deals and dangerous promises. How he'd escaped, but never really got free. The more he talked, the more I understood why Tom had been so desperate. Ethan wasn't just a man. He was a storm, and we were caught in its path. As night fell, we lay on the bed, too exhausted to keep watch. Jamie's head rested on my chest, his breathing uneven. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice small. "Me too," I said, my arm tightening around him. "But we're in this together." For the first time that night, I felt him relax, his body molding to mine. It wasn't a solution, but it was enough for now. Outside, the world was dark and dangerous. But in that moment, it was just us, holding on to each other like a lifeline. The motel room was a cocoon of quiet, but it couldn't shield us from the storm outside. Jamie's head still rested on my chest, his breath steady now. But I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every distant car engine, set my nerves on edge. The weight of his confession about Ethan lingered. A reminder that we weren't just running from a man, we're running from a past that refused to let go. At dawn, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Jamie. His face was soft in sleep, the tension gone for a moment. I stood by the window, watching the parking lot as the sky turned gray. We couldn't stay here. Ethan's men had found us too easily at the diner, and I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Jamie stirred, sitting up with a groan. "You didn't sleep," he said. Not a question. "Couldn't," I admitted. "We need a plan, Jamie. We can't keep running blind." He rubbed his eyes, nodding. "I know. But where do we go? Ethan's got eyes everywhere." I thought of Tom, his cryptic instructions, his insistence on the safe house. He'd known about Ethan, known the danger, but he'd sent May, a kid with no experience, into the fire. Why? The question gnawed at me, but there was no time to dwell. "We need help," I said. "Someone we can trust." Jamie's eyes darkened. "There's no one. My dad's compromised, and I don't have anyone else." "You have me," I said, the words fiercer than I intended. "And I'm not giving up." He smiled, small but real, and it was enough to keep me going. We packed up, paid the motel clerk, and hit the road again, this time heading toward Albany. I remembered a friend from high school, Sarah, who'd moved there after graduation. She was tough, resourceful, and owed me a favor from years ago when I'd helped her out of a jam. If anyone could hide us for a day, it was her. The drive was tense, both of us scanning the mirrors for any sign of Ethan's men. Jamie fiddled with his sketchpad, drawing jagged lines that mirrored his mood. "What's Sarah like?" he asked, breaking the silence. "She's solid," I said. "Runs a small auto shop now. Doesn't take crap from anyone. She'll help us." He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I hate this," he said. "Dragging you. Now Sarah. Into my mess." "Stop," I said, glancing at him. "We're in this because we care about you. That's not a burden, it's a choice." He didn't respond, but his hand found mine on the gear shift. A quiet thank you. My heart raced, not from fear this time, but from the warmth of his touch. I wanted to freeze that moment, but the world wouldn't let us. Sarah's shop was on the outskirts of Albany, a squat brick building with a sign that read Grease Monkey Repairs. She was outside, wiping her hands on a rag, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. When she saw me, her face lit up, then narrowed as she took in our tense expressions. "Alex Harper," she said, tossing the rag aside. "What kind of trouble you in now?" "Big trouble," I said, glancing around the empty lot. "Can we talk inside?" She led us to a back office cluttered with tools and paperwork. Over coffee, I told her everything: Tom's favor, Ethan, the chase. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened with every detail. "You need a place to crash," she said when I finished. "I've got a loft above the shop. No one will look for you there. But you gotta tell Mew Hat's the endgame." I looked at Jamie, who'd been quiet, his sketchpad open but untouched. "We need to get Ethan off our backs," I said. "Permanently." Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "Sounds like you need more than a hideout. You need leverage. Got anything on this guy?" Jamie spoke up, his voice low. "He's got a ledger. Keeps track of his deals, drugs, money, everything. If we could get it, we could turn it over to the cops." I stared at him. "You didn't mention a ledger before." He shrugged, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't think it mattered. It's in his apartment in Brooklyn. He showed it to me once. Like a trophy." Sarah whistled. "That's your ticket. But breaking into a guy like that's place. That's suicide." "Maybe," I said, my mind racing. "But it's better than running forever." We spent the day in Sarah's loft, planning. She lent us a burner phone, not Tom's, a clean one, and I called a contact from NYU, a hacker named Leo who owed me for covering his rent once. He agreed to dig into Ethan's digital footprint, see if he could find anything useful. Meanwhile, Jamie sketched, his pencil moving faster now, like he was pouring his fear into the page. By nightfall, Leo called back. "Your guy's sloppy," he said. "Got a security system in his apartment, but it's got holes. I can send you the specs. You're not actually going in, are you?" "Gotta," I said, my stomach churning. "Thanks, Leo." Jamie looked at me as I hung up. "We're really doing this?" I nodded. "We end this together." As we planned our move to Brooklyn, the weight of it settled over us. This wasn't just about survival, Anna Maria, it was about taking back Jamie's life. And maybe, just maybe, It was about finding out what we could be to each other when the danger was gone. The drive back to Brooklyn felt like a descent into the jaws of something hungry. The city's skyline loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the night sky, each light a reminder of the danger waiting for us. Jamie sat beside me, his sketchpad closed, his hands clenched in his lap. The plan was simple but insane. Break into Ethan's apartment, find the ledger, and get out before anyone noticed. Simple. Except for the part where we were walking into a lion's den with nothing but a hacker's specs and desperation. Sarah had insisted on coming, her pickup truck trailing behind us. "You're not doing this alone," she'd said, tossing a crowbar into her toolbox with a grin that hid her worry. I was grateful, but guilt gnawed at me. I was pulling another person into this mess, all because I couldn't let Jamie face it alone. Leo's intel had given us a window. Ethan was at a club in Manhattan until midnight. His crew likely with him. His apartment, a loft in Dumbo, was secured by a smart lock and cameras. But Leo had sent a code to disable the system temporarily. We had 20 minutes, tops, before the override reset. We parked a block away, the street quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. Sarah handed us black hoodies and gloves from her truck. "Stay sharp," she said. "I'll keep watch. Signal if you're in trouble." Jamie nodded, his face pale but determined. I wanted to say something, to tell him we'd be okay, but my throat was too tight. Instead, I squeezed his shoulder, and we moved toward the building. The loft was on the third floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and big windows. We took the fire escape, the metal creaking under our weight. At the window, I punched in Leo's code on the burner phone, praying it worked. The lock clicked, and we slipped inside, the apartment dark except for the glow of city lights. Ethan's place was sleek. Cold glass furniture, black leather, a bar stocked with expensive liquor. It screamed money, but the kind that came with blood. Jamie led me to a study in the back, his movements quick but careful. "The ledger's in a safe," he whispered. "Behind the desk." I nodded, my heart pounding as we crossed the room. The safe was small, embedded in the wall, with a digital keypad. Leo's specs included a bypass code, but my hands shook as I entered it. The safe clicked open, revealing a black notebook, its pages worn but meticulous names, dates, numbers, evidence that could bury Ethan. Jamie grabbed it, tucking it into his hoodie. "Let's go," he said, but his voice caught. I followed his gaze to a photo on the desk, him and Ethan, smiling, from last summer. Jamie's face in the picture was open, unguarded, nothing like the haunted look he wore now. "Jamie," I said softly, "we're done here." He nodded, tearing his eyes away. We moved toward the window, but a noise stopped us cold, the front door opening, voices spilling into the loft. Ethan was back early. "Hide," I hissed, pulling Jamie behind a bookshelf. My pulse thundered as footsteps approached. 2 sets, maybe 3. Ethan's voice was unmistakable, smooth and sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "They were here," he said. "I can feel it." Another voice, rougher, laughed. "You're paranoid, boss. They're long gone." "Check the study," Ethan snapped. We crouched lower, the ledger burning a hole in Jamie's hoodie. I could see his fear, mirrored in my own. But there was something else in his eyes, anger, resolve. He wasn't the scared kid from last summer anymore. The footsteps stopped just outside the study. I held my breath. My hand finding Jamie's. Our fingers locking. If this was it, at least we were together. Then my burner buzzed Sarah's signal. Trouble outside. We need to move, I whispered. Jamie nodded, and we bolted for the window, the voices behind us turning to shouts as they realized we were there. We scrambled down the fire escape, my heart in my throat, the ledger clutched tight. Sarah's truck was idling at the curb, her face tense. Get in, she yelled as we dove into the back. Tires screeched as she floored it, the warehouse shrinking behind us. But headlights followed Ethan's crew, fast and relentless. They're on us, Jamie said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Sarah glanced in the mirror. Hold on. She swerved through Brooklyn's streets, taking corners so sharp I thought we'd flip. The ledger slid across the truck bed, and I grabbed it, shoving it into my bag. Jamie's hand found mine again, his grip fierce, like he was anchoring us both. We're not done yet, he said, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the chase. Sarah's truck roared through Brooklyn, the city a blur of lights and shadows as Ethan's crew tailed us, their SUV's headlights like a predator's eyes. The ledger was heavy in my bag, a ticking bomb that could end this or end us. Jamie's hand stayed in mine, his grip a lifeline as we braced for whatever came next. Head for the precinct, I said to Sarah, my voice hoarse. We turn this over. Let the cops handle Ethan. She nodded, her jaw tight, weaving through traffic with a skill that made me glad she was on our side. Jamie leaned forward, his eyes on the rearview mirror. They're gaining, he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. I glanced back, the SUV now close enough to see the driver's silhouette. My heart pounded, but Jamie's resolve fueled mine. We'd come too far to lose now. Sarah took a sharp turn onto a side street, then another, trying to shake them. The precinct was 10 minutes away, but it felt like a lifetime. The SUV rammed us, a jolt that sent my bag sliding. Jamie grabbed it, clutching the ledger like it was his heart. Hold on, Sarah shouted, flooring it through a red light. Horns blared, but she didn't flinch. The SUV stayed on us, relentless, its engine roaring like a beast. Then, a miracle sirens. Blue and red lights flashed behind the SUV, a cop car pulling them over for the light we'd just run. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank God, I muttered. Sarah didn't slow down until we reached the precinct, a squat brick building that looked like salvation. We stumbled out, the ledger in my hands, and ran inside. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman, raised an eyebrow as we approached, breathless and disheveled. We've got evidence, I said, sliding the ledger across the counter. Drug deals, names, dates, Ethan Merrow's operation. She flipped through it, her expression shifting from boredom to focus. Wait here, she said, disappearing into a back room. Jamie leaned against me, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. You did it, he whispered. You got us here. We did it, I corrected, my arm around him. For the first time in hours, I let myself believe we might be okay. The cops took our statements, the ledger disappearing into evidence lockup. They promised protection, a safe place to stay until Ethan was in custody. But as we sat in a holding room, waiting for news, Jamie's hand found mine again, his fingers tracing patterns on my palm. Alex, he said, his voice soft but sure. When this is over, I want us to figure this out. You and me. My heart stuttered, the weight of his words sinking in. You mean? I mean I've been an idiot, he said, a small smile breaking through. I've loved you for years, but I was too scared to say it. I'm not scared anymore. I leaned in, my forehead against his, the world narrowing to just us. I love you too, I said, the words freeing something in me I'd locked away for too long. We kissed, soft and tentative, then fierce, like we were making up for lost time. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed above us, but it didn't matter. For the first time that night, I wasn't afraid. Hours later, the sergeant returned. Ethan had been arrested, caught trying to flee the city. The ledger was enough to bury him, his crew already turning on each other. Tom called, his voice heavy with relief, promising to explain everything when he could. He'd been working with the cops, setting Ethan up, using us as bite of truth that stung but saved us. We left the precinct at dawn, the city waking up around us. Jamie's hand stayed in mine as we walked, the weight of the night lifting with every step. We weren't just friends anymore, weren't just running. We were something new, something worth fighting for. The danger had brought us here, to this moment, where love was stronger than fear. And as the sun rose over Brooklyn, painting the sky gold, I knew we'd face whatever came next together.